our sergeant of arms open us up with the prayer after the national anthem. So we can start with the national anthem. Give thanks. Give thanks.
Yes, somebody playing the anthem.
At the being that land of Ethiopia, it's the black man kingdom. Ethiopia, the land of our fathers, the land where our gods come to be. Like bees to our hive swiftly gather, our children are gathered to thee. With our red, gold, and green floating o'er us, and our emperor to shield us from wrong. With our hope and our future before us, we hail and we chant and we sing. God bless our needless high, who keeps Ethiopia free to advance with truth and right, to advance with love and light, with righteousness leading. We hail to our God and our King, humanity pleading, one love for us all. Ethiopia, the tyrants are falling, who once more thee underneath. And children are artically calling from over the distant sea. Jehovah, the great one, has heard us. He has come to protect us from wrong. He has sent his holy angels to guide us and to protect us in this land. God bless our needless life, who keeps Ethiopia free to advance with truth and right, to advance with love and light, with righteousness pleading. We hail to our God and our King, humanity pleading, one God for
Yes, sir. Hallelujah. We give thanks in the Most High. We give thanks. We're grateful to this light come together to use our energy, to use our mind, and to use our irit to be in accordance, be in agreement where we the black peoples of the world to protect ourselves from abuses, spreads love, solidarity, and to achieve what's ours on this earth as it is in Zion. We give thanks. We're grateful on this hour, on this day, grateful in our hours on this light to strive for more in our lives and to seek within ourselves the truth in which we need to be fulfilled. And we give thanks on this light to be able to have a platform to where ones and ones can do these type of reasonings and we can build in the Most High name. Abacadus, Gedamari, Katamari, Ali Selassie, Sim, Exhibit. And we understand and overstand the energy, the irit on this earth, the new world order that we're in, to assimilate for selves, us having a hand in the game and giving us the opportunity to build on these type of things and to be able to grow from removing ourselves from a reality that was given to us, from a construct that was almost our inheritance of disarray, of self-destruct. So we're grateful to remove ourselves from these things and grateful to have a space where ones and ones could share their minds and receive nourishment of our irit, and we give thanks. We ask that all our strengths and efforts here today are built up, most high cause in our lives, build up a purpose that's greater than the ones that we have for ourselves. We ask that we remove all personal interests in our gains and ask that we be able to achieve mindsets that we need to be able to overcome adversary and to be able to overcome the forces that set against us. For we know the only way to beat a force is put a greater force or equal force against it. So we strive to be that equal or greater force, and we give thanks for this light. Yes, sir. And the Most High, Abacadus, Gedamari, Katamari, Ali Selassie, Sim, Exhibit, name we affirm, we pray, and we meditate. Sila, Sila, Sila. Ashe. To the chair, give thanks. Uh, 1 minute, everyone. Look like the chair. I'll be back here shortly. Having some technical difficulties, but give thanks.
Yeah,
Highly.
God bless you.
Yes, sir. Highly.
Yeah, Rastafari, give thanks, man, for the energy, you know? Yes, I. Jah blacks in the place.
Highly. Was in that sun this light, and I couldn't think of nothing but His Majesty and them marching in that sun, marching. And I said, I gotta, gotta get on the call and keep it going. Yes, sir. Highly.
Yeah, man, you don't know right now, you know, the Africans uniting together is only right for we start uniting because you don't know once America unite with Africa, it's an unstoppable thing. And in England and in Guyana, Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica, once everybody unite as one, listen, man, they have to stand down because we
Yes.
taking over.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good, thanks.
And outside sitting down in the car just enjoying the raindrops, man. It's so nice how the rain just dropping and purifying the earth and cleaning the earth. You know, and, oh yeah, and they just attack Israel. So right now the Gaza people fighting back. Yemen, everybody joining in because Netanyahu actually made a speech saying that he's gonna control the whole of Gaza. So I guess because he made that speech right now, they get an attack. I hear they're supposed to be in blackout, fire burning, all kind of thing. Judgment.
Yes, sir. It's a lot going on over there. Well, we know We know. Yeah. The reality is different for some people now. So
But I said that's supposed to be God land. That's supposed to be the land of the Creator Almighty. So why so much bloodshedding in that land there?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, God's land is where we are. You know what I mean? We are Ethiopia. So they create these things for themselves. Yeah. I don't know if you want to take over, Minister Laz. You know what happened to the chair.
Yeah, for real. Ethiopia, to me, Ethiopia is Jalan, man. And that's why we now have to repatriate and get out of Babylon, because if Babylon decide to jump in the fight with Israel and war against them Muslim country, brother, trust me, is beer fire go break loose. Beer people go dead. Beer people go suffer in this place. So I try now for set something up so by the time that time reach and I could make a move, that's why we need to come together, and I'm glad they are keeping the meeting. That's why I'm joining, because this is the time we're supposed to be talking about how we could go by making the move to transition. Because we already got things in place like the land and stuff like that, but we still need X amount of money, or at least valuable materials, whereby when we leave and we go there, we have a start. Because if, as I say, if America join in this war, is the whole world gonna be at war?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, I think the chaplain and president. I think the president said he was checking on the chaplain. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start now. We'll give thanks. Give thanks. I wanted.
Bless up.
Yes, I wanted to start off with a question. But before I do that, I'm going to read a speech from His Majesty. And I think it is appropriate. Page. When we speak about the lost heritage, lost legacy, we return to the fact that prior to the war between Ethiopia and Italy, the Black movement had a central solidarity, unity. Everyone, from the reverends, the pastors, the rabbis, the imams, all were yelling Ethiopia. Mute your phone, please. Were all speaking and stating Ethiopia as the liberation of we, the Black peoples, as the essence of the establishment of we, the Black peoples. Once the media propaganda, COINTELPRO, were able to take the negative remarks of Marcus Mosiah Garvey against His Majesty. They were able to propaganda a division of the movement from Ethiopia. Then the movement became characterized as just saying we were Africans and it was Pan-African. But then there was yet the grips that Africa was surrounded by borders created under the Berlin Conference. And Africa was fighting to be liberated itself. But prior to that, the basis of the liberation was oneness with the empire of Ethiopia. Marcus Garvey, the Black Hebrews, even when you hear the creation of Noble Drew Ali's Canaanite temple, you have to understand the terminologies that are being used. So prior to the Italian invasion, Ethiopia was our solidarity. So today we argue and we battle about how can we get unity? How can we get past religion? How can we get to where we can unite to do the works? Well, I was always taught as a young man, measure twice, cut once. Measure twice, cut once. And clearly, we are taught to take the skills and the lessons that our ancestors handed down to us that work. Ethiopia worked. Ethiopia works. The empire of Ethiopia works. So it was a major component to derail the Black, the Pan-African movement from Ethiopia. And it was accomplished. Once Marcus Garvey was unable to meet with His Majesty, and he spoke of words of coward and these things. See, we're some emotional people. And we're ego mentally led under imagery. And so now the propaganda was propaganding against His Majesty. And before, these major newspapers didn't care what Marcus Garvey said. They weren't publishing what Marcus Garvey said. But once he spoke against His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie, propaganda, media war took place. See, so it's nothing new under the sun. We're not just finding out that the media and all of them take part in this military strategical mind control that they try to place on us. But we're also witnessing that there is nothing new under the sun. They've done it before. Ibrahim Toure, they said, oh, this is a young man just stealing gold to do what he wants to protect himself and, whatever. His Imperial Majesty Jet Magazine 1954 or 1953, right before His Majesty came to the United States. What does Jet Magazine put out? He's this playboy who's stealing the wealth of his country. They spoke negative against him. They started the propaganda war. Yes, they did. And the Pan-African movement followed. They followed it. And so, in the course of an alignment with obtaining our status under customary law as indigenous peoples of the Empire of Ethiopia, we lost that right by our own denial of the King of Kings. But then, in the essence of it, the prophetical basis that brought the story, the knowledge of His Imperial Majesty to the Caribbean under the biblical aspects was held too long in Jamaica. But then the direction was not deposited into the governmental aspects as a customary or governmental body being under the Empire of Ethiopia, but it became the proselyting that we had found the religion that all people had been looking for, and we had the rightful religion. And so the key then was proselyting for religious rights. And the course of self-government was waived in the essence of the process of asking governments for religious rights. When the King of Kings, the Emperor, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, His Imperial Majesty, had set forth our emancipation, our redemption, but yet we turned to our own understanding. So I will read the words of His Majesty as we look at the world today of taking the stance against neo-colonialism. The legacy of His Majesty as he toured the world, standing against the neo-colonialism, standing for the liberation of all sovereign indigenous peoples, taking forth the argument of Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, fighting for the removal of apartheid from our brothers and sisters in South Africa. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I, Jah Rastafari. Ethiopia is by her own choice a non-aligned state. Our policies on vexatious international issues of the day have been declared to all, and our adherence to them is steadfast. The urgent imperative of universal disarmament the settlement of disputes by peaceful negotiations, the supremacy of reason and logic over force and irrationality. Dedicated to the cause of Africa, Ethiopia remains prepared to implement agreed measures calculated to advance the objectives embodied in the Charter of the Organization of African Unity. Ethiopia's actions in her international dealings have been wholly consistent with her declared policies. We insist today that the way to peace among men and nations rests in the even handed application and enforcement of principles of the United Nations and the Organization of African Unity. Non-interference in internal affairs of others, self-determination for the remaining dependence of dependent peoples of the world, respect for territorial integrity of independent states. Above all, Ethiopia is dedicated to the principles of equality of all men, irrespective of differences of race, color, or creed, as we do not practice or permit discrimination within our nation, so we oppose it wherever it is found, as we guarantee to each the right to worship as he chooses, so we denounce the policy which sets man against man on issues of religion, as we extend the hand of universal brotherhood to all without regard to race or color, so we condemn any social or political order which distinguishes among God's children on this most auspicious of grounds. Thus, we oppose the secessionist regime in Rhodesia because it refuses to the African majority of the right fully to participate in the life of that territory. We denounce the government of South Africa because the evil doctrine of apartheid espouse there denies the basic equality of men and raises to the status of sacred dogma and Odysseus and false racism. We condemn the policies followed by Angola and Mozambique because those territories withhold from the Africans the full exercise of their rights as freemen. We shall not rest until these regimes have been swept from the African continent. We shall not falter in the struggle until freedom has been won by our American brothers. His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie. Yes, sir. Would anyone like to speak on those words? Floor is open before we go to the next stage.
Yes, sir. Just powerful and very prophetic when you talk about the living science. You talk about being the example in the flesh and being that representation for the world. Yes, sir. Hallelujah.
Yes, sir. Are those regimes being removed from the continent? Has the spirit stayed alive? Floor is open.
It lingered. It's alive still. Yes, sir. But you know, the force, you know, it's been like 50 years now. And I think I was just talking about this as well. It's very powerful. How it's like we it's on us to keep it alive. But I think this you can't hide the iron, and it's in the paperwork, and it's still in the atmosphere. But the truth and the living science of it, we must be those generations to come. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The floor is open. Yes. Floor is open.
Yes, I give thanks. I think most of our people just wouldn't even know that His Imperial Majesty spoke like that. I think most of us don't even have the knowledge that, you know, the oneness that he spoke, and that's the issue, even when we talking about organizing and, building.
Yes, sir. The unity, the oneness, getting away from the indifferences, because these are things that have been created through time. Read a little bit of it again. Our policies on the vexation or the vexatious international issues of the day have been declared to all, and our adherence to them is steadfast. The urgent imperative of universal disarmament, the settlement of disputes by peaceful negotiation, the supremacy of reason and logic over force and irrationality, dedicated to the cause of Africa, Ethiopia remains prepared to implement agreed measures calculated to advance the objectives embodied in the Charter of the Organization of African Unity. Ethiopia's actions in her international dealings have been wholly consistent with her declared policies. We insist today that the ways to peace among men and nations rest in the even handed application and enforcement of the principles of the United Nations and the Organization of African Unity, non-interference in the internal affairs of others, self-determination for the remaining dependent peoples of the world, respect for the territorial integrity of independent states. Above all, Ethiopia is dedicated to the principles of equality of all men, irrespective of differences of race, color, or creed. Equality. Now, the leadership of this world, we're not working in equality. Do you think colonialism was equality? Do you think slavery was equality? Do you think the Jim Crow or any of these uh, uh, racial superiority statuses of policy were working for equality? The laws today are weaponized to deny equality. The conditions and the situations of our people have been orchestrated through a non-equitable system. And we know this. So the question comes to us, what makes things equitable? What gives us equality? Where do the principles of this lie? Let's use some symbolism and some supreme mathematics and some science. We always have to stress the basic science. It takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. It takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. Stage one, in the equitable inequality position. The root of the force, we trace back to the orchestrator of the spell, the Roman Empire, also known as the Platonius or the Platonian Empire, coming out of the Hellenized Greek Empire. And when it comes to us, it comes under the papal bull doctrine, the doctrine of discovery. So we trace that force. That's the opposing force. So now in the fight, we have to counter that force. Now, we always educate this because many have been led astray. And when we look at that force is coming from an empirical position. That force is coming from an empirical position. That means an empire. So it is coming under the pre-issue as an empirical force. An empirical force, the papal bull. Now, I can go do a UCC1 and file to recapture my straw man. But I'm filing it in their dock, in their ports, their docks, their dockets, their courts. And we know courts are banks, currency. So I'm doing business with them still. So I can go file the UCC1 to place a counterclaim on my straw man.
1 week straight here. Army foot swell up fat.
But I am not countering the empirical force. I'm filing this docket into their docks. So I haven't left their waters. My vessel, my ship is still registered to their waters, to their ports, their courts, their banks. So I'm not really countering the empirical force because it takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. So here goes this empirical force, this empirical spell being cast throughout the world. And then it appears there is no one to counter the force until the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the conquering Lion of Judah, Emperor of the Empire of Ethiopia, This is an equal force. This can counter the empirical force. This can counter the empirical force because it takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. So now an equitable balance has been put into the equation of life where there was none. No one can question it because there was no works for equality. There was no direction for human rights. No one was there to stand for Africa until Ethiopia was victorious against Italy. Until the words of His Majesty became prophetically true, as it is us today. It shall be you tomorrow. And as the bombs hurled into London, into England, to the UK, and they knew that the words given by His Imperial Majesty had come to haunt them all. No one stood for Africa. They still weren't standing for Africa. They were trying to evade their own self-destruction.
It's fuck up.
Yeah.
And after the victorious change, Africa still had to fight for liberation. His Majesty still had to go and stand for South Africa for liberation. So the victory against Mussolini and Hitler didn't change Europe. So whose victory was it? What was the victory? What had changed? Because the pretenses of their authority under the doctrine of discovery was still being held. France, UK, all of them were saved by the victory of Ethiopia that twaddled the invasion into Europe. But they didn't change. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. So now we are to a stage where the words of His Majesty are prophetically coming true again. See, how did we become so divided that we forgot ourselves? We forgot our connections. We forgot our story. But there's a key here, though. See, because this is two levels here. Because we always are people who overstand as above, so below, as within, so without. So when we speak about our history, remember we're spiritual beings. So our history will always represent also spiritual science. We are the echoes of the spiritual science. That is our footprint throughout life. So our ancestors would always write in a dual dimension. And thereby is always a lesson. You know, even if they use the trickster is Asu, keeper of the crossroad. So there's always a crossroad in all of our lives where we have to find our way. And we cross over, you know. So let's go into a little bit of science now. And let's go find our oneness. Find the counterforce to the force that divided us. See, they used the mental programming. So this mental programming has to be countered. They used a defining value system for religions. So this defining value system of what is religion and this is religion and these is what gets you to God, you know, they have been able to define the value system under this. Even today, that's what people were going to say as Rastafari, or we want you to recognize us as a religion. We are more than that. We are what you call the law of continuity. And let's start there. I have my black law here, but I want to kind of jump that a little bit. Would anyone like to read this first? And let's get a little bit more. Let's get into this technical, but this is as above, so below, as within, so without. So this comes as a legal dimension or law, but it is also a little bit more. Somebody like to read this for me. Anyone? It help you remember it. I can remember it. I read it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I come.
The law of continuity or doctrine of continuity is a legal principle that in some contexts can be used to recognize the rights of indigenous peoples to their customary tenure or legal systems after the establishment of a state sovereignty over their land. However, The application and interpretation of this principle can be problematic, particularly when it is used as a means to control or deny indigenous rights rather than protect them. More detailed explanation.
Yes.
Yes, sir. The concept of continuity. Presumption of existing rights. The doctrine of continuity presumes that when a state acquires sovereignty over a territory, existing rights, including those of indigenous people, are not automatically extinguished, but rather continue to exist under the new state's law. It acknowledges that indigenous legal systems, while potentially different from Western legal institutions, may still be valid and relevant. Recognition of pre-existing systems. How it is applied. Aboriginal title. In cases of aboriginal title where indigenous peoples have rights to land based on customary tenure, the doctrine of continuity may be invoked to recognize those rights under the new legal systems. It can be used to recognize the continued existence of indigenous legal systems even when they are not formally codified in Western law. The doctrine of colonial influence.
Hold up right there, one before you go there.
Yes, sir.
They say they are not formally codified in Western law. Everybody understand what that means? Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. All right. What happens is in Western law, they kind of put everything in the books and they put their numbers and their systems on it. And then a lot of them did it in contractual agreement under doctrine of discovery. So these become what they call codified laws, codex. So they did this. Now in the indigenous communities, ours was mostly oral tradition. And so if you took on this position as a family heir who's always held this position, you were taught to memorize and know the tradition. So they didn't always write things down, or it might be just items like the Lakota have what they call star bundles. And inside of a wrapped buffalo skin, there may be a stick, some cloth with some different types of string wrapped around it. There may be a stick, and the star bundle holder knows the story of each of the items because they teach a sacred history, and that sacred history becomes the law and the customary ways of the people. So it's not written. So Western law likes to say, where is your records for this? What gives y'all the right for this? So they challenge us that they say you don't have this written down. So it can be used to recognize the continued existence of indigenous legal systems, even if they are not formally codified. So our systems and ways of life, they don't have to be written down by them. They are handed down to us in traditions and customaries. In the Gullah Geechee, we had oral traditions. We had our poro, or what you call our pen societies, our secret societies, that you would be blindfold, taken out at night, initiated, then you go through certain things. They give you certain traditional knowledge of certain symbols and seals, and you're educated in that. And they hand it down generation to generation under certain traditional ways to remind you of the science from whence you came. So now the laws and the knowledge of that is embodied in you. And it continued in you. For according to our customary science, our customary laws, it does not end in you like that. So it could never end. That's our laws. See, so when we stand on it, yeah, we're using spiritual overstanding, spiritual overstanding. the continuity. So we are continuing. We are the continuing of the customary kingdoms of the Kushite Ethiopian Empire, this great Nubian empire. All right, continue, Daniel. You may.
Yes, sir. The doctrine of continuity is often criticized for being a colonial framework that assumes the state has the authority to validate or deny the validity of indigenous laws. Critics argue that it can be used to control or deny indigenous rights by requiring them to meet the standards of colonial law, rather than respecting their own legal systems. The requirement of continuity can sometimes be used to diminish the autonomy of indigenous peoples by focusing on post-contact practices and customs, while potentially overlooking pre-contact practices, customs, and traditions. Moving towards recognition and pluralism. Show down some, Ross. Some argue that a more effective approach is to move towards legal pluralism, where different legal systems, including indigenous legal systems, can coexist and be respected. True reconciliation and justice require acknowledging that indigenous legal orders are not just surviving, but thriving and evolving. In summary, while the doctrine of continuity can be a tool for recognizing indigenous rights, its application and interpretation are complex. It's important to consider how these doctrines might be used to perpetuate colonial control and how to move towards a more just and respectful approach that recognizes the full range of, let's go down, Ross, indigenous legal systems and rights.
All right. Yes, sir. Give thanks, give thanks, give thanks. All right, we need some feedback on that. I know it tickled some brains and made you think of some things. Come on, ask some questions on that. Let's build before we leave from that. Because a lot of suggestions were made also in this on how to counteract colonial aggressive authority trying to assume authority over the indigenous peoples. So what was your mind? What did you get out of it? Did it give you some thought processes? Let's talk. Let's talk international law. Somebody talk to me. Come on.
Where it show you how, basically, like they were saying, it's like kind of like they just automatically make their stuff better and they play it like that. I think it's like just a way you go about just your business when you, as I say, act like you're supposed to be there, even when you're not. And I think recognizing that, we can start working our way back to trying to figure out some of our natural indigenous rights because something was put on us with a certain force that we didn't really. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All right. So let's line it up with what we're doing. His Imperial Majesty. Remember, it takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. And an empirical force waved over the world, declaring its authority over all of us and placing its people as an authority over us. And doing that, it took a position of power and made us powerless to it. Now, takes an equal force or greater force. So we've already discussed that the empirical power is countered by the empirical power of His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie. Now, the empire of Ethiopia counters the Pope's claim over us. An equitable balance has been in place. Now, globally, for all people, His Majesty has in place the equitable imbalance for all races of people, because human rights, equality have now been the vision or the morality that has been placed back into international law. But as we said earlier, the UK, France, and them, they didn't change. Nothing rightfully changed. They still were trying to hold their position of a delegation of authority through the doctrine of discovery, the papal bull doctrines. So now, His Majesty has placed the weight of balance in the system, a scale, something to measure on. But the next thing is to equip His people to be able to use that scale of justice. See, because it's placed there, just as it is placed there, a moral call is placed in international law before all, but yet it is still an illusion and a deception amongst most of the European leadership. They're still seeking their empirical power over the world. They're still dealing with race class. So now, the equipping of the people, because the Pope equipped a second hand of people to move under his delegation of authority. And these people became the governments of colonies. So again, it takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. So now His Majesty tells the people, don't stop. Keep pushing. All right, if you win in equality, supposedly, removal of segregation, supposedly, and supposedly getting equal rights, and His Majesty says, don't stop. What's the goal? What is the goal? So now the people have to be equipped to handle the scale of justice. So it takes an equal force or greater force to overcome a force. And the Pope had issued out a delegation of authority. And these were issued as charters to people who became chartered under the kingdoms of England, the kingdoms of France, the kingdoms of Spain, and they received charters. And these charters became colonies, became governments, and also slave runs. But then they came and captured territory, took over lands, and they encodified it, made it law, policies, jurisdictions. But they were chartered. So the King of Kings charters we, the Black peoples of the world, the diaspora, a government. a master plan as it is, because it wasn't just a government in one spot just to say, oh, this is the diaspora government for the people in America. No, there was a development for a constitution for the world. You don't get that. So you simplify that. You overlook that. This is not average. This was a master plan of unity and to federalize the unity as Confederate states, tribes, and nations under the Constitution, chartered by the Empire of Ethiopia. Jurisdictions, policies, laws, countering a force. So now it's a technique, it's a fighting style. And you about to punch out your opponent. And all of a sudden you drop the fighting style, which gave you the counterpunch of power. You drop the position that gave you the defense, the countering force. So when many people walked away from the Ethiopian World Federation, deciding that they were going to develop a different fighting style, religion. So it was not the force, but a tool of the force. So now we weren't countering, we were, it's almost like if you're fighting and a person keep hitting you with a hook and you change your whole fighting position because now you scared of that hook. See, the religion was the hook, kept catching us off guard. We didn't know what to do, so we developed our whole self off of the hook. But that wasn't the force. What was the force behind the hook? So now we reassess. Measure twice, cut once. We look at what our ancestors used that worked. So we're talking about a counter style. For His Majesty said we had to counter. We had to counter this force, or we would be annihilated. He said we had to counter this force, or we would be annihilated. So He's given us a tool to counter the force. Now, the boy said, I come from the Shaolin Temple. They use the Shaolin style. So let us go to the next thing. And we're going to define this out so that you can actually get this. Let me see if I could get a short definition. All right, I think that's one.
Having introduced the monist and dualist systems, I now want to dig a little deeper and speak about some practical instances in which questions regarding the judicial enforceability of international legal obligations in domestic orders has arisen. I'll firstly talk a little bit about key concepts such as direct effect, direct applicability, before then discussing the two specific examples that are also mentioned in the chapter of the textbook, namely on the one hand, the European Union and its special legal order, and then on the other hand, the US Supreme Court judgment in Medellin. As you will see in a second, the concepts and examples discussed here relate more to the monist approach to incorporating international law, which makes sense, of course, because if you think about it, in a strictly dualist system, the question of the judicial enforceability of international legal norms does not even arise. These are two separate legal spheres, and domestic courts in a dualist system do not even see or recognize international legal obligations as sources that are applicable in its jurisdiction. There's one caveat though, and this concerns the interpretation of the implementing domestic legislation. As already said at the end of the previous video, what courts in dualist states try to do is to align the interpretation of the international instrument with the one of the domestic implementing act. And in this sense, don't be surprised if you find a reference, if you find a citation to the international legal source in a judgment of a dualist court. This most likely will be in order to understand better and interpret the provisions that are in the domestic legal act. Moving on to the monist systems, if we want to understand how international legal obligations are enforced by domestic courts in practice, we need to understand the concepts of direct effect, direct applicability, and the self-executing treaty. Now, as Klaus rightly points out, these three different terms mostly refer to the same thing and are used interchangeably. In the European context, we talk more about the direct effect and the direct applicability, and in the US, to stay with our two examples that we'll discuss in a second, we talk more about self-executing and non-self-executing legal obligations. So what do these terms mean and imply? Well, basically, they designate a specific category, a type of international legal obligation, namely one that can be directly used and applied by a domestic court in a monist system. And now you might wonder and ask, hey, wait for a second, was not that the very definition of monism, that we can directly apply international legal norms in a domestic legal order? Well, that is correct. However, in a monist system, we usually draw distinctions between those norms that can be directly applied and other norms that do not qualify as such because they do not create rights and obligations that courts can directly use in order to come to their decision. More specifically, provisions that do not have direct effect, direct applicability, that are non-self-executing, are usually addressed to the legislator, either implicitly or explicitly, giving them the task of implementing legislation, a little bit akin to what we see in dualist systems and what dualist systems require by default. However, in a monist system, we also have these other kinds of norms where rights and duties, in particular for individuals within the jurisdiction, are directly created and that therefore do not require this intermediary step, do not require the legislature to step in and create acts that would give effect to the obligation in question. As the textbook relevantly points out, one expression of the direct effect is that it can create private causes of action for individuals, for legal entities such as companies, in which they can use this provision as an actionable right vis-a-vis another entity, for example, the government. But this is not the only way in which direct effect comes to be relevant. In certain cases, it can also be used as a defense or a shield. For example, when an individual faces criminal prosecution that then, however, would go against this international legal obligation. Even if there's no actionable right here, the individual can still rely on it as a defense in order to not be criminally liable. To illustrate how this works in practice, let's look at two specific examples. The first one being both historic and famous, namely the European Court of Justice's landmark decision in Van Gent and Loos, where it was confronted with a preliminary reference by a Dutch court. The Dutch court basically asking whether a Dutch shipping company could rely on the European treaties in order to challenge a custom duty that the Dutch government had instated in contravention with these treaties. Now, what the court decided was very remarkable, particularly back then in 1963, but even from today's perspective, in that it decided that the European treaties, the European community had, and I quote here, created a new legal order of international law for the benefit of which states have limited their sovereign rights and the subjects of which comprise not only the member states but also their nationals. And this in fact confers upon these individuals rights which become part of their legal heritage. So in plain words, the court decided that the treaty and the prohibition of the custom duties in the treaty had created an actionable right, had created a private cause of action for the individual, for the transportation company in question, and which then the domestic courts in the Netherlands had to apply. Now, in the Dutch context, that was not so much an issue, perhaps because it's a monist state anyways, but it was revolutionary in the sense that even those states within the European community that were dualist states, or still are, were still forced from that moment on to, in fact, take into account European Union, European community back then, law in their domestic legal proceedings. Now, apart from basically forcing monism even onto dualist states and creating a direct effect and direct applicability in principle for European Union law across member states, the court did another really important thing in this ruling, namely to clarify that not all provisions actually qualified as such. Only when they were specific enough, when they were clear enough, and when they were actually unconditional, did they actually bring about such direct effect. The second example given in the textbook hails from the United States and goes to show how even within a monist system, a domestic court is actually able to use the distinction between direct effect and not direct effect, or in US parlance, between self-executing and non-self-executing treaty obligations in order to limit the effects, the impact that international law can have in a domestic legal setting. In this particular case, Mr. Medellin had been sitting on death row in the United States and had claimed that he had been denied consular assistance by his home state, Mexico. In this claim, he relied on a previous decision by the International Court of Justice in Avena, where the court had been confronted with a very similar question and had found that the United States, in denying this kind of consular assistance, had breached the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. So the US Supreme Court now was faced with the question whether this ICJ judgment could in fact be invoked in the US legal system, and it came to the conclusion, it answered this question with a no, saying that in fact ICJ decisions, just like the optional protocol, just like the UN Charter, just like the statute of the ICJ, were non-self-executing, meaning that individuals could not invoke them in court. The fact that this had been a repeated breach by the United States of the Vienna Convention, and that in fact in Article 94 of the UN Charter, member states are obliged to comply with judgments of the ICJ, all of this did not matter. What's important to take away from this judgment is that even in a monist system where domestic and international law are supposed to be one legal order, we actually do have often a practical barrier between the two. And the gatekeepers in this case are the domestic courts, which are using this distinction between, on the one hand, self-executing, directly applicable and direct effect norms, and on the other hand, those norms that do not qualify as such, to achieve outcomes that are in some way comparable to what dualism achieves with the strict separation between these two legal orders. This concludes the videos for this week. I really look forward to discussing these questions and some cases.
All right. Now, the key to this term, I'm going to see if it gives a short definition, but it's called self-executing treaty, self-executing treaty. That is what we're dealing with here. I'm going to see if I can find a short They going to self-executing. I hope you know.
In the United States, you are about to get a clear and detailed answer. Let us break it down step by step. First, the process starts with the executive branch. A member of this branch, often the president or another official, negotiates the terms of the treaty with other countries. Once the negotiations are complete, the president or the negotiating official signs the treaty draft. Next, the president submits this signed treaty to the Senate for their advice and consent. Here's a crucial part. The Senate does not ratify the treaty itself, but it must approve it with a 2/3 majority of the senators present. This is a high bar for passage, making it quite challenging for a treaty to move forward without broad Senate support. If the Senate approves the treaty with the required 2/3 majority, the process shifts back to the executive branch. At this point, the president makes the final decision to enter the treaty on behalf of the United States. It is important to note that even if the Senate approves, the president has no obligation to ratify the treaty and can choose not to do so. Once the president decides to proceed, the treaty is formally ratified, and it becomes part of federal law. Treaties in the U.S. have a unique status. They can operate both as domestic law and as international agreements between nations. Here's another key point. Not all international agreements go through this process. The president can also enter into executive agreements and other non-treaty agreements without Senate approval. However, these agreements do not have the same legal standing as treaties that have been approved by the Senate. For a treaty to be enforceable in U.S. courts, it must be either self-executing or implemented by an act of Congress. Self-executing treaties have the same effect as federal law and can supersede inconsistent state or local laws. Non-self-executing treaties, while still binding internationally, require additional legislative action to become enforceable in domestic courts.
All right.
In summary,
There is self-executing treaties, and then you have
international treaties become part of federal law through a
non-self-executing
process
treaties
that involves
that
negotiation by
require
the
more
executive branch,
legislation, so a court
approval by a
people can
2/3 majority
police
in the
can
Senate,
ignore it, and they
and
can put what
final
they want, and they'll tell
ratification
you
by the
you're gonna have to get
president.
a legislator
This process
to
ensures that
in
treaties
a
have
law
significant
stating
legal weight
this
and can
treaty
shape
has
both
big
domestic and
force.
international relations.
But the supreme law of the land is international law. So that's a good little bit.
How do international treaties become part of federal law? If you are curious about how international treaties become part of the law in the United States,
Yeah, it's a good little video. Now, why are we there? Let's get to the next stage. Um, all right. This is the difference in the Ethiopian World Federation and all other Black organizations. Is the Ethiopian World Federation is the organization chartered. This is the counter charter to the delegations of the Papa Bull, the governments that the Papa Bull placed over us have a charter. Now the King of Kings gives us a charter. Now, this charter is incorporated to do business like all other governments around the world. because all of the governments around the world are operating in a form of commerce. Commerce. So the registrations to handle the business as the government of the diaspora, it means more than what we are recognizing. So we just read of that. You have self-executing treaty. And the treaty language is important because if it implements a domestic empowerment, that becomes an agreement. That means it's already an agreement in the language. It's contractual. So the treaty of amity and economic relations between the United States of America and Ethiopia. The United States of America and Ethiopia desiriously of the emphasized friendly relations which have long prevailed between the peoples of manifesting their common desire, the high principles and the regulations of human affairs to which they are committed shall be made more broadly effective and encouraging mutually beneficial investments in closer economic intercourse generally between their people, have resolved to conclude a treaty of amity and economic relations, and have appointed as their plenipotentiary the President of the United States, the Honorary Reeves Childs, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the United States of America to Ethiopia, His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor of Ethiopia, His Excellency Ato Akilo Abditil Ward, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, who having communicated to each other their full powers found in due form have agreed upon the following article. Now I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. I'm going to back up. Whereas the Senate, what did you just hear? They have to do what? Whereas the Senate of the United States of America, by their resolution, July 21st, 1953, 2/3 of the Senate's present concurring therein did advise and consent to the ratification of the said treaty and notes. Self-executing treaty power. The Ethiopian World Federation has self-executing treaty power. It's a counter force. Let's go a little further. So let's go back up here to Article 1. What's the agreement in this contract? There shall be constant peace and firm and lasting friendship between the United States of America and Ethiopia. The two high contracting parties reiterate their intent to further the purpose of what? The United Nations. So this contract is based on an agreement in human rights. It says economics now. But it's reiterated the intent. It's based on the Declaration of Human Rights. See, that's the economic balance. So now the United States is bound to uphold certain human rights that are declared in the Declaration of Human Rights for the United Nations. Each high contracting party shall have rights to send to the other high contracting party duly accredited diplomatic representatives. Dr. Malek Ubayn is an accredited diplomatic representative who shall be received and upon the basis of reciprocity shall be accorded in the territories of such other high contracting party the rights, privileges, exemptions, and immunities due them under generally recognized principles of international law. So this is a contract creating the rights of a certain standard. Now, I'm going to go down what we always like to read. I'm going to come back up to that 5. Start to read it now, but I don't want to throw it on. So the Ethiopian World Federation is a countering force. Is a counting force. It is a world government, a federation of Black peoples around the world. So Ethiopian World Federation. Just listen what the word says. Ethiopian World Federation. Oh, that's a serious mission. And it's incorporated to handle business around the world. That's its mission statement. To unite the diaspora. That's its mission statement. To correct abuses. To save its people from annihilation. Companies constitute under the application laws and regulations of each high contracting party. So if you go under the applicable law and you go incorporate a company or so forth, shall have their, we're going to go over this word again. This means so much. Shall have their juridical status recognized within the territories of the other high contracting party. See, that's a domestic law. That's domestic law. Now, why we never moved in that? It's a countering force. But do we really know what it means? Let's go a little further. Let's go a little further. So the status that's recognized, so the companies, as used in the present treaty, companies means corporations, partnerships, companies, and other associations, whether or not with limited liability and whether or not for pecuniary profit. Corporation, Ethiopian World Federation Incorporated. But it has a juridical status. It takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. So they were given charters and delegations of authority. And they called themselves United States of America. They called themselves Canada. They called themselves Jamaica. They called themselves Dominica. They called themselves Virgin Islands. But they received the charter from the Papa Bull. We received the charter from the King of Kings, who counters the Pope's claim over we, the Black peoples of the world. June 15th, 1935, I am the emperor of all of Africa, countering the Berlin Conference, countering the codification, the codifying of the Papa Bull doctrine as the law of the land of Africa. The King of Kings counters this. I am the emperor of all of Africa, and I am the king of all Negroes around the world, including those in the United States. Countering. Now a charter is issued to counter the lower forces who bring annihilation upon the people, who bring injustice upon the people. Now a charter is put in place to counter the charters of the Papa Bull. You say, well, it is because it's for we, the Black peoples of the world. So everywhere in the world, there would be this charter to protect the people. It was a countering force. Who could send out around the world a countering force to unify the people against the colonial oppressive governments? So what is the countering force? Let's go a little further. Juridical status, corporations. Somebody like to read this? Somebody like to read this for us? Let's see if we can get an understanding from this. Let's get an understanding of this word juridical, because you were given under the Ethiopian World Federation, a corporation under the Treaty of the Empire of Ethiopia. So we have a self-executing treaty power that we have to learn to walk in, to stand for the people. So we have a juridical status. What is juridical? Somebody please read the definition.
A judicial can describe anything connected to the legal system, including law, legal proceedings, or the legal profession.
Well, start at the black laws. Start at the top. Give thanks. Yes, sir.
In black
Yeah, there you go. Yes, sir.
In Black Law Dictionary, judicial generally refers to something of or relating to the administration of justice or the office of a judge or to law or jurisprudence. It signifies connection to the legal system and its functions.
Okay.
Judicial can describe anything connected to the legal system, including law, legal proceedings, or the legal professions.
Yes, sir. Last two.
Relating to the administration of justice, it can also refer to the processes and institution involved in the administering justice, such as courts and judges. A judicial person, in specific legal contexts, judicial person refers to a non-natural entity like a corporation or a partnership that has legal rights and duties.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, juridical. And let's see one more area. Hold on. Laws with duties, rights, recognized as a legal authority. I wanted to give you one more statement on juridical.
Okay.
Juridical person, the term refers to entities like corporations, governments, or non-government organizations that have rights and obligations under the law. Juridical aspects concerns the legal systems, laws, legal procedures. Now, juridical is a terminology also for what is defined as to administer the administration of law, the administration of government, the juridical obligation. But you are given a like it's the same authority as they have received with their charter, and they say that they have the right to create laws for their government. We are given the same juridical authority and rights to create laws and so forth. So when you talk about now, you start saying, well, the Ethiopian World Federation was supposed to create an international court amongst all of the indigenous blacks around the world, meaning we were supposed to have a federation, a corporated body of government in every place in the world where we exist. And then we were supposed to create our court system. Each local should have a court system. That each local should also have those who are trained in it. And then we have what is called the global court system. And then we do our international rulings. If we find that people are still violating our rights, violating our human rights, the moral standards of law, our court's supposed to be making these rulings. We're supposed to be issuing out these summons to governments that they are in violation of the people's human rights under our jurisprudence. They are protected. All tribes and people come up under the umbrella of His Imperial Majesty, from under the Papal Bull. So now we have to start thinking, okay, we were supposed to be implementing these steps to counter the abuses, to bring forth justice for our people, to carve out our place in the sun, to disseminate our ancient culture, to relieve oppression. See, administrate justice, administrate, but it is a word that goes with to administrate. And be able to administrate, and operate in your juridical power is to have liberty to govern yourself. Self-determination is to have liberty to govern yourself. Is to have liberty to govern yourself. Those who took us in captivity opposed us to having liberty to govern ourselves. They were told to deny us the ability to govern ourselves. They were told to deny us to speak of our ancient heritage and govern ourselves. But a countering force, an equal force, a greater force came and gave us a charter to administer law, to counter these forces, to counter the forces. Let's go a little further. Juridical. Yeah. I was allowing y'all to also observe the rules and the different topics and what is going on in these rules. Let's go here first. Now, I probably need to read definition of slavery. State practices established this rule as a norm of customary international law, applicable in both international and non-international armed conflicts. International and non-international conflicts. Now we're going to define these things. That's what I need y'all to talk about today. The prohibition of slavery was specified as early as the Lieber Code, although not actually spelled out in the Hague and Geneva Convention, nor in the additional Protocol 1. It is clear that enslaving persons in an international armed conflict is prohibited. The various rules in the Geneva Convention relating to the labor of prisoners of war and civilians concerning their release and return, as well as prohibition in the Hague regulations of the forced allegiance of persons occupied territory presuppose the prohibition of slavery. Read that again. Hague regulations of forced allegiance of persons in occupied territory presuppose the prohibition of slavery. The prohibition of slavery and the slave trade in all their forms have been recognized in Additional Protocol 2 as a fundamental guarantee for civilians and persons hors de combat. Enslavement was considered a crime against humanity in the charters of international military tribunals at Nuremberg and Tokyo. Enslavement is also listed as a crime against humanity under the statuses of the International Criminal Court and of the International Criminal Tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and for Rwanda. The military manual and legislation of many states prohibit slavery and the slave trade or enslavement, which is often but not always referred to as a crime against humanity. In the Kajunur Jalak case before the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the defendant was accused and inter alia of enslavement as a crime against humanity and as slavery as a violation of the laws or customs of war, but was acquitted on these counts lack of evidence. Now let's get in a little debate here. Let's crank something up here. Let's crank something up. Let me do this word first.
Hey, it's some toast, but I'm jump.
In both,
Some toast, but I'm going to.
please mute your phone. We can hear you. In both international law and the Black Law Dictionary, liberty generally refers to the freedom from unreasonable restraint or control, including the right to act accordingly to one's own will and the right to contract and engage in common occupation. In international law, this concept is often intertwined with fundamental human rights, encompassing freedom of thought and expression and association. Black Law's Dictionary defines liberty as freedom of expression from erroneous control. It also emphasizes the power of the will to make unrestricted choices and direct external actions without coercion or restraint. Liberty in international law. International law has recognized liberty as a fundamental human right. Fundamental human right. This concept is often intertwined with the freedom like freedom of thought, expression, assembly, and association. International treaties and conventions such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights provides a framework for protecting these liberties on global scales. The concept of liberty in international law is often used to prevent arbitrary or unreasonable interference by states in the lives of individuals. Wow. International law protects individuals' liberty. It also acknowledges the need for reasonable limitations in certain circumstances, such as for public safety or rights of others. The concept of liberty is constantly evolving as societies and international law grapple the new challenges of technology. Now, let's take liberty. Oh, well, I can go back. I'm sorry. Let me do it just like this. Let's take liberty just a little bit further. All right. In context of international law, self-determination refers to the right of peoples to freely determine their political status and pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. It is a core principle of international law, recognized in the United Nations Charter and various international treaties. While Black Law Dictionary doesn't explicitly define liberty and self-determination, it does define personal liberty as the right to behave as one would like within the bounds of society's rules. The concept of self-determination is closely linked to the idea of freedom, but is specifically about the freedom of a people to determine their own destiny. Now, did their system give you freedom to determine your own destiny? Did it give you that liberty? No. So a countering force came and chartered that liberty for you. And we go over this multiple times, but we can never go over it enough. First, I'm going to read. The Ethiopian World Federation's Constitution and Bylaws, Article 1. The name of this organization shall be Ethiopian World Federation Incorporated. The aims and objectives of the Ethiopian World Federation Incorporated shall be to promote love and goodwill among Ethiopians at home and abroad, and thereby to maintain the integrity and sovereignty of Ethiopia. How are we going to maintain the sovereignty? To disseminate the ancient Ethiopian culture among its members, to correct abuses, relieve oppression. How are we going to relieve oppression? There has to be some power given to us to be able to do this. There has to be some power given to us to counter this oppression. Could just words on the paper the meaning way more than what we have been standing. Didn't just ask us to counter the oppression, but we were given a vehicle of power to use the tools that have been laid forth by His Imperial Majesty to counter the oppression. International law. They called His Majesty the Great Statesman. He's seen the chessboard, but he's seen the sleeping giant, the inevitable variable. The Black peoples of the world. The calculations of those who were sitting as superiority in international law for the right to seem as though they were in agreement with things so that they could exploit natural resources and move like they're in a congruent, but all of it is polytricks. So they never perceived certain things as even a counter to their reality. So they signed the treaties with His Majesty. They later signed the agreements under the United Nations. And His Majesty made it his mission to create an OAU to teach the African countries collective security. And then He gave collective security to the diaspora. We have to think, because some like to say, oh, last Ethiopian World Federation was only made to help Ethiopia in a time of war. So that's not the king wasn't thinking about y'all. No, sir. June 15th, 1935, His Imperial Majesty stated, He is the king of all Negroes around the world, including those in the United States. The war from Italy started after that. The war from Italy started after that. That is a different overstanding for most people because they simplify the EWF in those aspects. So they make it like it's an ambiguous organization. It's not the keen thought of His Majesty. I am the king of all Negroes around the world. What is the thought of His Majesty? What is his statement at that time for this? I am your last hope. What's His Majesty planning? But even further, when we speak about juridical self-determination, in the context of international law, self-determination refers to the right of people to freely determine their political status and pursue their economic, social, cultural development is a core principle of international law recognized in the UN Charter and various international treaties, while the Black law does not explicitly define liberty and self-determination. It defines personal liberty as a right to behave as one would like within the bounds of societies and rules. The concept of self-determination is closely linked to the idea of freedom, but it is specifically about the freedom of a people to determine their own destiny. Now, let's go one more step into this. I think it's at the top. Principles of self-determination in international law. The principles of self-determination have widely been invoked in recent years, especially by spokesmen of countries which have until lately been under foreign dominion or domination. Broadly speaking, this principle has two connotations: the internal and the external. The internal aspect implies the rights of the people of a state already recognized by international law to determine their own form of government. The external aspects concerns itself with the rights of a people to determine their nationality and statehood. This paper is devoted exclusively to the study of self-determination. In the latter context, is self-determination a legal right backed by legal obligations? Its moral basis has been recognized widely, but the validity in international law is still disputed. Although politically, this principle found specific formulation in President Wilson's famous 14 points announced in 1917. There was no mention of it in the Covenant of the League of Nations. Even in the period between the two world wars, the principle found no recognition in international law. Self-determination wasn't in international law. It wasn't in international law. As was applied, demonstrated in the Alliance Islands case, the archipelagos inhabited mainly by the Swedes became a part of a new Finnish state, which established later. Finland broke away from Russia in November 17th. Sweden demanded the rights of self-determination for the islanders, but the Commission of Jurors, which was appointed by the Council of League in 1920 to give an opinion on certain objections raised by the Finlands, declared categorically positive international law does not recognize the rights of national groups as such to separate themselves from the state of which they are formed apart by a simple expression of a wish, or any more than it recognizes the rights of other states to claim such a separation. So in 1920, they weren't even recognizing self-determination. Again, in 1944, self-determination received no mention in the Dumbarton Oaks proposal. At the suggestion of the Soviet Union, the San Francisco Conference rephrased Article 1, 2 of the United Nations Charter, laying down as one of the purposes of the organization to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, to take other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. Similarly, Article 55 also refers to self-determination as a principle rather than a right, as an auxiliary to peaceful and friendly relations among nations. There has been much deference or difference of opinion among jurists with regard to the question whether the charter creates legal obligation for member states with respect to human rights. Some authorities, such as Professor Latopage, have held the view of international legality of human rights is derived from the fact that they prominently figure in the statement of the purpose of the United Nations that members are under a legal obligation to act in accordance with these purposes. Another school of thought holds that human rights in the Charter have no juridical, here it says, no juridical character. No juridical character. No juridical character. Now, anybody wanna guess why I made a key statement on that twice, and what does that mean?
I mean, it's definitely significant.
Uh,
As if you say it twice, it's definitely significant.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. So why did I say that?
That depends on the people themselves to determine their self sovereignty, how they define that within within their custom.
All right, so here we go. Another school of thought holds human rights in the Charter have no juridical character and do not constitute legal norms under positive law, meaning it does not operate an obligation um, to be administered in the positive domestic laws, as you would say, right? Okay. Now, why is that key there? What's important about that? Where did we just read juridical at? Where did we just read juridical at? Where did we read it at right before this? What set us on this mission? What was the significant thing that made the position of the Ethiopian World Federation Incorporated important? And what power was derived under? So how did we get to juridical?
Self-executing treaty.
Okay. And what was that? We talking about the treaty of what? Treaty with who? Huh?
The Treaty of the Circle of Life.
No.
Um,
How did we get the juridical? Takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. How did we get the juridical?
with the charter by His Majesty, given to us with the authority of Ethiopia.
How did we get the juridical? Guess I'll come back to page. This is 480. 480, the number, what's that number for melanin, ain't it? Somebody read this for me. Because I read it. And I think when I read it, it's not locked yet. You have somebody read it for me. Anybody, somebody?
I wish I could read it, but I'm on the road right now. Okay.
Somebody read this little page right here. I'm gonna leave it up there to somebody read it because that's the thing y'all miss the question. So you can look at it for as long as you need right now. We look at it to somebody read it because you got to remember it. Because this is how we got the self-executing treaty. This is why we looked at what makes a treaty is enforceable domestically. What authorities does it give? How you gonna counter? How you gonna contest the oppression? How you gonna relieve and give forth, help bring forth a justice and remove them from abuse? Where lies your authority? You're contesting their delegation of authority with the standing of your official capacity and delegation of authority and the standing under treaty rights under the Empire of Ethiopia in your official capacity as a member, as an official operating member of the Ethiopian World Federation, the government of we, the Black peoples of the world. Somebody please read this.
The United States of America and Ethiopia, desirous of emphasizing the family relations which
read the title. Read the title. Read the title.
Okay, I apologize. Title Treaty of Amity and Economic Relations between the United States of America and Ethiopia. The United States of America and Ethiopia, desirous of emphasizing the friendly relations which have long prevailed between their peoples, of manifesting their common desire that the high principles in the regulation of human affairs to which they can, doesn't mean are, committed, shall be made more broadly effective, and of encouraging mutually beneficial investments and closer economic intercourse generally between their peoples, have resolved to conclude a treaty of amity and economic relations, and have appointed as their plenipotentiaries the President of the United States of America, the Honorable J. Rives Childs, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the United States of America to Ethiopia, His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor of Ethiopia, His Excellency Atso Akulu World Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia.
Okay. So this treaty that His Majesty implemented, I'm dealing with the United States right now, but there are treaties with the UK, treaties with France. But with this treaty, Article 1 states the two high contracting parties reiterate their intent to further the purpose of the United Nations. First stage. Then we went down here to 7, and we read about each high contracting party. So Ethiopia coming into America, if it creates a corporation, what is the reality of that corporation? So if the corporation is chartered by the Ethiopian emperor, it is an Ethiopian corporation. Our charter, our constitution, bylaws are coming from the charter of the Empire of Ethiopia. So now this is a corporation of the high contracting party, Ethiopia, that is inside of the United States. So does it lose its power because it was incorporated in the United States? No. What does the treaty say? The treaty says, number 6, that companies constituted under the applicable law, if it's incorporated, and regulations of either high contracting party, so even though it's in the United States, shall have their juridical status. See, this is how we got the juridical. So now, juridical is to administer law. But see, you're here to administer justice, to save the people from oppression. See, you've already been given your official mission to do certain works to save the people from annihilation, from oppression. You're the government for we, the Black peoples of the world. So even though some would say the Declaration of Human Rights, it may not have all of the authority because it's maybe not seen in a juridical position. But His Majesty made sure in the treaty a juridical status is accepted. So the Ethiopian World Federation has a juridical authority. And that juridical position is reaffirmed through the Declaration of Human Rights because it's contracted in the treaty. And the treaty is self-executing treaty, means it's already been passed by 2/3 of the Senate. So it has domestic enforcement. It's applicable. It's a different type of power. Do we know how to use it? Now, we watched the video, and the video says self-executing treaty and the applicability and how it could be enforced in a domestic capacity. If you were paying attention, you would have been watching that strong because you want to understand those things, to understand how we move in power against certain operations that come against us. His Majesty already countered them. That's why you say checkmate. And the variable, this force, was given power, a delegation of authority that was taken away from them by the so-called charters of the governments today. You don't have right and liberty over your life. You can't determine what is school. You can't determine what is medicine. You can't determine what is religion. They tell you everything. You've never been at liberty. You've never had the right to self-determination. You've never been set free. You are still a prisoner of war. How do you contest this position of being a prisoner of war? Oh, yes, it's cloaked and deceptive as citizenship and as rights to a oppressive system. How do you contest this system? So when we say it takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force, it takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. So they were given a delegation of authority through the papal bull. We're given a delegation of authority to free our people from oppression, save them from annihilation. We're chartered by the King of Kings. And we have juridical authority. So we have authority to administer law. And when we take this position and we stand on it, and the system tries to come against you, are they declaring that they still have a delegation of authority over you? That you don't have the right to the government of your choice? That you cannot be redeemed to continuity by the emperor, placing you back in your regal status as regal and priesthoods of the ancient empires? You could not accept your birthright back to your ancient Ethiopian culture so that you can assimilate it to your children now? Are they denying you your nationality as an Ethiopian? See, your position to take up the mantle of the official front line, to take the fight on the front line for we, the Black peoples of the world. So you can't play with it. Can't be no game. Can't be nobody playing with the constitution and the reality of the Ethiopian World Federation. It is the frontline defense. There are tools attached to it. And the only way a vampire can get in the house and attack it is if we let it in. Many mistakes of the past and the feuding and those divisions and people warring over just taxation numbers and not really understanding it as a government. Led it to many people just leaving it void because they felt like it was powerless. Because the wrong minds were leading the line. Didn't understand what His Majesty had truly given us. So we have a countering juridical authority. That's how you relieve oppression. Front line. You don't have no political allegiance. You're not obligated to nothing but defending we, the Black peoples of the world. You don't defend no religion. You ain't defend nothing. You defending nothing but we, the Black peoples of the world, to have the right to whatever religion they want, to have the right to be at whatever they want. You the front line. You the balance. You the scale. Now you become the instrument of justice. So the spirit of justice that His Majesty placed within the world, it continues fighting on. But now if we chase petty differences and let down our fighting style and remove our positions from power to uphold petty indifferences, then the front line has been broken by us, not by our enemy. The shield of defense that His Imperial Majesty gave us has been broken and crushed by us, not by our enemies. Oh, what a dreadful day it would be for we, the Black peoples of the world, if our last hope we crushed and destroyed through petty indifferences, when His Majesty came and brought us the message to remove the indifferences, the biasness, deal with equality in your being amongst your own, deal with the collective security to defend equality, to be the difference in the world. So we have a juridical authority. Let's go one more step. We're going to open the floor up and all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And they are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in the spirit of brotherhood. Sounds like the Ethiopian World Federation. To promote love and goodwill among Ethiopians at home and abroad, and thereby to maintain the integrity and the sovereignty of Ethiopia, to disseminate the ancient Ethiopian culture among its members, to correct abuses, relieve oppression, and carve for ourselves and our posterity a destiny comparable with our idea of perfect manhood and God's purpose in creating us, that we may not only save ourselves from annihilation, but carve for ourselves a place in the sun. In the endeavors, we determine to seek peace and pursue it, for it is the will of God for man. To promote and pursue happiness, for it is the goal of human life and endeavors. To usher in the teachings and practice of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. To promote and stimulate interest among members in the world affairs. To cultivate a spirit of international goodwill committees. Article 2. Everyone is entitled to all rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of political, jurisdictional, or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other litigations of sovereignty. So nobody can contest what you about, what you bound to, what you stand for. Article 3, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Article 4, no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. Question of the night. Is the delegation of authority was set up by the Papa Bull, which created our colonialism, being colonized and enslaved, and the governments who obtain power still hold the power from that, and they still hold us under their authority. Are we still being held in slavery? Are we still being held to servitude? Are we still being held to obligation to a system through threat of violence upon our being? And if we are feeling that, what do all of the people feel? So we, the Ethiopian World Federation, have to relieve our people from this oppression. Now, in the universal studies, the Quran says that it is worse to oppress a man than to kill a man. It is worse to oppress someone than to kill someone. Now, we've had many discussions on that topic there. So I'm going to stop it right here, and I'm going to open the floor. And I want to get some feedback, some questions. Do you see the countering force? Do you see the power? Do you understand the positioning? Because as we go from here, we're going back to the Montevideo Convention. And we're going to really dive in for the next 15 minutes, or the next 11 minutes, sorry. The next 11 minutes, the Montevideo Convention Floor is open. Floor is open. Next floor is open. Give me some feedback. Talk to me. Do you see the movement of power that has been laid out through the positioning and emplacement in international law by His Imperial Majesty? From the charter of the Ethiopian World Federation, the Ethiopian World Federation. Just listen to it. World. Who else says world? You understand? They say World Health Organization. And then they let them define what is health for the people. Well, we have the Ethiopian World Federation. We should be defining what is health for our people. We do that. We're supposed to be countering the forces of oppression. So if they're killing us with food, we should be able to define what is food. That's self-determination. How do we do that? See, this is why it's important to protect the structure from the foolishness, from the divisions based on religion, tribalisms. Should be warriors who be like, hey, don't play with this. It's the life and bloodline of my children. This is our redemption. Don't play with this. People should be scared to play with it. Floor is open. Floor is open. Floor is open. I'm going to share. I'm going to share. Take the equal force or a greater force. Floor is open. Floor is open. Are you getting
I
understand?
do believe,
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
okay, I do believe that we are enslaved under a system, clearly,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know, honestly, the exact question that you're asking.
Okay, so if we're enslaved still under their system, they still haven't gave us liberty or freedom. It takes an equal force or greater force to overcome that force.
Right.
They hold us in submission to a supposed system that we need their government. Correct?
Mhm.
And under that
Correct.
we fall under what is called neo-colonialism. Correct? So
Correct.
these governments were issued charters and sent out by the Pope. Correct?
Correct.
All right. So now, to counter this, the King of Kings sends out a charter to create. Let's look at it. Let's look at it. Yeah, it's going to help us out. So we are called the Ethiopian World. What we call the Ethiopian World
World Federation.
Federation. All right. Somebody help us and let's see what a federation is. Can we read? Can somebody read it? Hold on, let me see something. Is that better? Can somebody read federation? Let's see what federation is all about.
Federation, also called a federal state, is an entity characterized by a union of partially self-governing provinces, states, or other regions under a federal government. Federalism. In a federation, the self-governing status of the component states, as well as the division of power between them and the central government, is constitutionally entrenched and may not be altered by an
Unilateral
decision. Unilateral decision, neither by the component states nor the federal political body without constitutional amendment.
Okay.
Sovereign power is formally okay. Good.
Go ahead. Read that.
Sovereign power is formally divided between a central authority and a number of constituent regions, so that each region retains some degree of control over its internal affairs.
Okay. Now, the Ethiopian World Federation has the Central International Executive Council. But the members of that International Executive Council, who are voted members from different locals. And so that council represents a centralized global authority to help govern. But then you have different locals all over the world, and they are considered federal states. So His Majesty gave us a counter government to their government. See, their government will never give us equality. Equality comes from us operating as an equal government. It takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. They would never give us the force. They would never give us the government. But His Majesty did. Then he implements in the treaties the juridical authority to protect that government. So now it's for the people, because he's not announcing, I'm setting this up. It's a checkmate. These are moves over calculation of time to empower the people. Oh, well, was His Majesty, did he try to empower South Africa to be liberated and a self-governing people? Yes. Was he dedicated to the plight of we, the black peoples of the world? Yes. Did he understand the plight that we were under by being under the slave governments? Yes. Could he pull out bombs and shoot them and make them let us go? No. He's the Prince of Peace. So with his word, he conquers all. In the ingenuity of intelligence and in the operation of peace, in overstanding the simplicity of life, he moved us and redeemed us from them without one gun or bomb. And everybody wanted him to come with guns and bombs. You need to raise yourself up to another frequency because you're still in the barbaric frequency. King of Kings operates in supreme intelligence. The King of Kings operates in supreme intelligence. And he offers that crown of intelligence to his people. But do they accept the mission? Do they accept the authority that has been placed upon them? Will they honor the obligation and stand firm to protect the front line, to save our people from annihilation? Will they allow the programming that the enslaver has placed upon our minds to create the indifferences that have been bound on us, to stop them from being able to implement the tools of liberation, the tools of self-determination. A federation, a government. Well, let's look a little bit more. So an outside unilateral power cannot come and do nothing to a federation. We have to vote and put something in our constitution to change something. And that's what protects the Ethiopian World Federation today. It's our constitution. So we were given a constitution. Now, I don't want to make it read too much. I just want to get it here. All right. Can we read that little bit right there? Can we read that little bit right there?
Okay. The governmental or constitutional structure found in a federation is considered to be federalist or to be an example of federalism. It can be considered in comparison with the, you told me this word, unitary, is that it? Unitary state, France and Japan, for example. France and Japan, for example, have been unitary for many centuries. The Austrian Empire was a unitary state with crown lands after the transformation of the Austria-Hungary monarchy. The remaining crown lands of so-called Sicilian Dania. Yeah, thank you. That became, I don't usually read, but
Cisleitania
became
federated.
There you go. You got it. Became federated as lander of the Republic of Austria through the implementation of its constitution. Germany, with its 16 states or Länder, and Nigeria, with its 36 states and federal capital territory, are examples of federations. Federations are often multi-ethnic and cover a larger area of territory, such as Russia, the United States, Canada, India, Brazil, Pakistan, or Australia. But neither is necessarily the case, such as St. Kitts and Nevis, or the federated state
let's
of...
stop like quarter to, so we can get out of here before 12.
Virgin, could you mute your mic, please?
All right, bless.
Go ahead. Or the federated states of Micronesia.
Federated states of Micronesia, about 40% of the world population live in a federation.
Okay, so the Ethiopian World Federation, like it's a lot of times we overlook even the name. A federation for the world, a government for the world, the diaspora world. We, the black peoples of the world. So His Majesty says, I am the king of all black peoples of the world. Then he gives you a government, a charter to operate, because your enslaver is not going to give you power. His Majesty gave it to us. For 50 years now, we have overlooked it for over 50 years now. We have searched for it. We've tried to create other entities. To this year alone, there have been so many type of entities that have been trying to be coming together, and they forget the very thing that they say. They need an entity that represents the global body. They need an entity that has regular constituted elections so that they can say it represents the people. His Majesty already laid that foundation out. The only thing the AU is asking for is a foundation that His Majesty already gave us.
Hmm.
But we're overlooking it. We're dividing it from its collective power because of indifferences. So we're bringing our own indifferences into a constitution that was created to remove that, so that we did not have to battle about religion or any other individual capacities that we live through. The only requirement was we, the Black peoples of the world. So then it ended the construct of, oh, does Black have a standing in law? Well, it has a constitution that places Black in synonymous as a definition with Ethiopian. So it has a standing in law, and it is given a constitution. We have a constitution. The Moorish Science Temple didn't have a constitution. They don't have a constitution. They ran around with the Treaty of Marrakesh. They were never a formed government. It's different. Totally different. So His Majesty gave us a charter, a government. Let's look a little further. And we closing out here. We're not going to go that far. I wanted to give you something simple, but I put that Papa Bull, so it didn't come out right. So let me do this. Okay. That's basically what we want to get. Should do. Should be right here. Hopefully it's going to take us too far. Charter colonies were type of colonial governance in early American settlements where the colonies were established by a charter granted by the monarch. Very important. These charters allow for a significant degree of self-governance and autonomy, distinguishing them from other colonial types such as royal or proprietary colonies. Charter colonies were often created to encourage economic development and settlements, granting rights to the colonists to establish their long legislative assemblies and conduct local affairs. What makes a charter issued by England that gives power of governmency or self-governance more powerful than a charter issued by the King of Kings. What makes the difference? How were these charters to these colonies and these people established and conquered and did all of these things? What's the difference? We go back to the Montevideo Convention so that we can close out, but we're going to read this for a few articles because we want to go to sleep tonight thinking about the power that His Majesty has given us to fight oppression, to free our people from these abuses, and to save ourselves from annihilation. We need you to go to sleep feeling the power, coming into the creative vision to create the solutions in the many different aspects that we need. I asked someone to read Article 1, and we're going to go down to, I think it's Article 6. So these are number 3 or 4 sentence little articles, so it ain't going to take us long. Somebody want to read?
I think it's just us. I don't know who the other person was that wanted to read for me earlier. Where is he at now?
I'm at work, my dear. I'm at work. That's why I can't.
Oh, yes. And
Oh,
Daniel fell off. It looks like it. I thought Ross Daniel was still on. Oh, yeah, he is on here. Ross Daniel is.
yeah, he must have fallen asleep. He must have fallen asleep though. Okay, I'll read then if everyone's okay with that.
Yeah, you doing good. You doing good. You ain't messing up. They're not regular words, So I think.
Yeah, I'm usually the quiet one in the background who just listens, but if no one else will participate, then I'll participate. The state as a person of international law should possess the following qualifications: a permanent population, a defined territory, government, and capacity to enter into relations with the other states.
All right, hold up right there.
Article 2.
Hold up right there. Hold up right there for a minute. The state as a person of international law. So we just read that the Federation is a state, national law. It is a constitutional body. It has juridical, it has a governmental administrative authority. But for it to be a person of international law, it has to have a permanent population. So it says, we, the black peoples of the world, has to have a defined territory. The world. The world. It has to have a government, constitution, and the capacity to enter into relationships with other states. So we have signed the treaty with the Lakota tribe. We've signed treaties now with SARD. We're signing treaties also with the agreements with the Boer Kingdom. We're signing the agreements in these levels to establish the principles of Article 1's 4 principles that are required to be a state of international law. So now we're countering the disempowerment, and we're coming with an equal force, a governmental force. All right, go ahead. Article 2 to Article 3.
Article 2. The federal state shall constitute a sole person in the eyes of international law.
So, as some may say, we are a body, EWF, and we're centered around a centralized constitution. We're centralized around an international executive council, a duly executive council elected by multiple locals around the world. The whole body is a sole person in the eyes of international law. So when you're in a local and you go to do works to protect your people from abuses, you are operating in your official capacity under international law. Article 3. Go ahead.
It's like loading for me. Okay, see now. Article 3. The political existence of the state is independent of recognition by the other states. Even before recognition, the state has the right to defend its integrity and independence, to provide for its conservation and prosperity, and consequently to organize itself as it seems fit, to legislate upon its interests, administer its services, and to define the jurisdiction and competence of its courts. The exercise of these rights has no other limitation than the exercise of the rights in the other states according to international law.
Did you get the last one?
Would you like? Yes, I said the exercise of these rights has no other limitation than the exercise of the rights of other states according to international law. Are you wanting me to go on to Article 4?
Yes.
Okay. Article 4. States are juridically
Yes.
judicially equal, enjoy the same rights, and have equal capacity in their exercise. The rights of each one do not depend upon the power which it possesses to assure its exercise, but upon the simple fact of its existence as a person under international law.
So he made sure that we had a juridical authority, the right to administer law as a state, as a government, as a federation. States are equal. So we were talking about it takes an equal force or a greater force. States are juridically equal. So the administrative of law that the United States holds as its power, the administration of law that any other country holds as its power, it is an equal authority. Equal authority. states are juridically equal. And it's not the power of having a navy or an army to protect your right as a government. And that's not the only way that you have it. And it's not based on, oh, the United States recognizes you, because it's bigger than their recognition. If self-determination was based on people to recognize you, then it wouldn't be really self-determination. See, it's based on you recognizing yourself. See, we are the only ones that can shatter that reality. No one else can. We can build it or we can shatter it. See, it's not on them recognizing us. It's on us recognizing us. The political existence of a state is independent of recognition by the other states. Even before recognition, the state has the right. Now, what makes this so significantly important is this right here. Let me go up to the title. And this is the last thing I want you to read. Right here, just read that little bit that's showing.
It's the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of States,
Mm-hmm.
signed at Montevideo, December 26, 1933. Entered into force December 26, 1934. Article 8 reaffirmed by protocol December 23rd, 1936. Says Bolivia alone amongst the states represented at the 7th International Conference of American States did not sign the convention. The United States of America, Peru, and Brazil ratified the convention with reservations directly attached to the document.
Okay. Now, the year. So His Majesty declared that he is the emperor of all of Africa and the king of all Negroes around the world, including those in the United States. 1935. 1935. 1937. August 25th, 1937, the Ethiopian World Federation Incorporated received the signed charter. Now, this is world news in the time of facet pursuit around the world. So it would be belligerent of us to believe or assume His Majesty had no knowledge of the Montevideo Convention. A member of the League of Nations, and the members of the League of Nations meet to sign under international law rights and duties of states, and you believe His Majesty has no knowledge of it. So the language in the treaties, the charter given to the Ethiopian World Federation are not an ambiguous bunch of acts. They're a clear path to a countering force giving governmental authority to the diaspora. It takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. So His Majesty sees the forces that we are fighting. So He said principalities, forces in high places. They're not flesh and blood. It's the consciousness of the people. So the changing of something is to change the vibration, but it is to change the mind. The people were divided in their mind. The restoration to the people, the mind of self-governance, the mind of unity, the mind of love. And as we always stress, our Constitution says, save ourselves from annihilation. It takes us out of the mind of the passive waiting to be slaughtered and brings us to the mind of the active worker, laborer for the harvest. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. His Majesty gave us a great harvest. Now we must tend the field, protect the front line. 1934, 1936, the Montevideo Convention. Then in the 1940s, His Majesty signs a treaty distinguishedly stating juridical status. The language. Self-executing treaty power. A countering force that we must educate ourselves, educate our children, so that we may operate from this countering force of power that His Majesty has given us. It takes an equal force or a greater force to overcome a force. May the lion take their crowns again. Yes, sir. Floor is open. Any questions? Floor is open. Floor is open. Any questions? What is the countering force? How do we counter and what forces are we countering? What is the
Counter
Go ahead, yes, sir. Floor is open.
your side countering force is first and foremost us embodying the living science His Majesty showed us within ourselves to want more for ourselves. And then secondly, mainly based on the discussion, the reason of the night is the Ethiopian World Federation. And the forces are principalities. The we call it a lot of times the system, or we call it the colonizer, or some people less educated, they just mad. They don't know why. But it's an overlying force of value and lifestyle and culture being created for us that's not ours. It's not our ancient Ethiopian culture. It's not the law of the land. It's not the law of continuity. It's not our indigenous rights. So these are the forces against us, stuff that removes us from this nature and puts us into a confine of what they want us to have and what they want our value to be. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Would the enslaver ever give you a government to empower yourself for liberation?
Oh, they won't. They will do the best they can to prevent me and us from having anything like that.
So would you think that His Majesty would see that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Definitely think he would see that. I think when he was sitting on that throne, and they said he knew the fate that his people was going to see as they bowed before him before the war, and he still had to stand on that, and he had to stand on that for every black man in the world. As the world turned their back on him, sanctioned him with his waters, didn't give him no ammo, no nothing. I think a lot of these things were thought of, if not then at that very moment when he got the bath, or when he got where he was at.
Mm-hmm.
This was thought of. This feeling of knowing, like literally, we talk about Diddy and we talk about Bill Cosby and how they just kind of strip the black man no matter what position of power you in this world. But His Majesty was the biggest example of that, as the world just kind of just closed their eyes and try to act like it wasn't happening. And I definitely think he thought of it because, near-death situations and just struggle and triumph all together makes you think, like, how could I prevent this from happening? And when you got the world on your shoulders and you got every black man to represent, I definitely think His Majesty thought of the fact that we needed a hand in the game. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Floor is open. Floor is open. Floor is open. Floor is open. I'm going to show one more thing to close out. Very special thing that His Majesty did. His Majesty would give out gifts of ivory and gold. And, you know, to these European royal kingdoms and so forth, they knew what that meant. When Majesty presents the gift of ivory and gold, they know what this means. You know, here they stress Sir Winston Charles's cigar box made of ivory and gold. But there are many other countries, even the United States and so forth, that Majesty gave out the ivory and gold. So I'm gonna show you one thing here real quick. So I'm gonna take Solomon out of first. I'm gonna just open this and just go with it right here. King Hiram of Tyre had always been friends with Solomon's father David. When Hiram learned that Solomon was king, he sent some of his officials to meet Solomon. Solomon sent a message back to Hiram. Remember how my father David wanted to build a temple where where the Lord his God could be worshipped, but enemies kept attacking my father's kingdom. He never had the chance. Now, thanks to the Lord God, there is peace in my kingdom and no trouble or threat of war anywhere. The Lord God promised my father that when his son became king, he would build a temple for worship of the Lord. So I've decided to do that. I'd like you to send your workers to cut down cedar trees in Lebanon. I will pay them whatever you say, and will even have my workers help them. We both know that your workers are more experienced than anyone else at cutting lumber. Hiram was so happy when he heard Solomon's request, and he said, I am grateful that the Lord gave David such a wise son to be king of the great nations. Then he sent back his answer and received your message, and I will give you. So I'm gonna go all the way down. I don't want to go through all of that. Mm. Well, I wanted to just hit, well, here it is. That Hiram did the works in bronze and brass, but there were certain works that were in the ivory and the gold, which represented the throne. Um, so when His Majesty gives out that gift, it's not no, maybe I might say that. It's not anything when His Majesty gives out that gift um, with the ivory and gold. So it is a declaration to them of who He is. And they know it when he gives them that ivory and gold gift. Um, I was trying to find it. Some of these things they might not even put online no more. Used to be able to find certain books, but you can't find them no more. Not online. But I just wanted to touch that. So when you look at some of the things that His Majesty did, I just want you to pay a little close attention to some of them because they're statements of a high degree, a very high degree. Yes, sir. Chair, back to you. Floor is open.
Yes, I give thanks, give thanks. Anyone else? Any questions? This was quite rigorous reasoning this evening. A lot of good detail and a lot of simple realization as to understanding what we're reading and understanding the literature and understanding how the law is expressed. So gratitude and thanks to everybody coming in this evening and those who were adamant to keep up and keep on in with this extensive learning. But it's extensive because the history is long and the details are very long. As Madison did come in like a thief in the night. So even like what we just reasoned on, of course, His Majesty knew about these laws. Of course, he knew about these different things, and his timing was immaculate. And it shows the strategy of the confidence in the actual work itself and how that plays out to be a reality. So, this is a thing that we all behold today to be used in its proper context. So, we look forward to learning more. We look forward to confining a reality for ourselves that brings us into the ability to create light and bring liberation. So we give thanks. We're gonna play special segment tonight to close out for this one. We're in the crown.
Earlier, earlier, just wanted to say something about the ending because everything was very, very I connected to how I've been feeling this last strong at least, but just how significant we hear certain information that's our history, that's His Majesty history, but it's our history, our story. And it could go by you if you don't look at the significance. We read the Bible and we hear these things and we grandiose them, but then you hear, oh, His Imperial Majesty gave ivory and gave gold to the folks. And like Minister Ross was saying, it could just sound regular. We make stuff sometimes when we don't know our history, when we read these scriptures, when we really tapping into our IRA, it just sound like, it ain't nothing, but it's big. It's the living science to living truth. And there is a connection. There is a connection there. So just the power of that and the glory of that. It brings me joy to be a facilitator, to keep that truth alive and to keep that realization of this new world order that we in, because we were under that science. They were going around doing exactly what they wanted to do, and especially to us. And this world could and would be a totally different place without this immaculate, arrival, immaculate performance, this immaculate emulation of the right thing. So give thanks. Yes, sir.
Rastafari rule and reign. Rastafari guide and protect I again. Hold fast. Lion with the crown, 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 lion with the crown. By Jaggerus and Anaxagoras, Rasputin, Erasmus, Napoleon, Leopold of Belgium, Julius, Octavian, and Augustus. In the August and in the July tribe, still you are not of the lion tribe. Still you are not of the lion tribe. Bring my daughters, bring my son. I know that the day will come. I know that the day will come. I know that the day will come. Napoleon, the Naples lion, obsessed with being God and man. Aishanda and Aristotle, his Judah. Egyptian culture conquered the conqueror. Bring my daughters, bring my son. I know that the day will come. I know that the day will come. I know that the day will come. Every time they hear the word campaign, they see Hannibal crossing the Alps again. In Washington, D.C., New York, and in Germany, and in London. Yeah. Did you see the obelisks of Axum in front of the Vatican? Oh God, Giordano Bruno, Joan of Arc, Da Vinci, Leonardo, and Michelangelo. The Black Medici of Italy now, an influx of innovation from the African coast. Bring my daughters, bring my son. I know that the day will come. I know that the day will come. I know that the day will come. Emperor of Ethiopia sent 40,000 soldiers to squash the revolt in America. There is a rock sculpture of Ishmael near Medina. I see African soldier. Bring my daughters, bring my son. I know that the day will come. I know that the day will come. I know that the day will come. 3 dimension, cubism, them a say Pablo Picasso. Oh God, African mask and the whole world now. The bronzes of Benin in Nigeria show. The pen, the penitentiary, the Pentagon, and the penal code. As I touch the ram, the gold window I know. 5 points of weak electromagnetic force. I am a door.
One moment, Chair. One moment, Chair. One moment. I totally skipped an answer that I have to say because the closing was, it takes an equal force or a greater force, and we were speaking on the countering, and I just looked when I was about to close something out, and I said, oh, I didn't even say it. Well, I said earlier that they tell us what is education. They tell us what is medicine. They tell us what is food and what can be done to food and what can be done to the water. But these are bases in which they have created under a term called standardization. Standardization in international law refers to the development and implementation of uniform rules and procedures to achieve order efficient across different countries and legal systems. It's a process of defining common practices, regulations for repeated use, aiming to minimize ambiguities and facilitate international cooperation. This standardization can be seen in areas like trade, intellectual property, and even national security. I want to read for certain trade, but I want to read this. International agreements and standards related to environmental protections, how they deal with agriculture and farming. They standardize all of these different things. Now, sorry. International standards is part of international law. Chapter 2 departs from the idea that international standards have binding effects and therefore should be considered part of international law. However, traditional sources of international law cannot embrace international standards because they do not meet the legal valid form they require. The chapter turns to new theories of international law as tools for placing international standards under the spectrum of international law. Under these new theories, international standards can be considered part of international law, but it is not clear where they can be located, except that they lay somewhere between hard law and soft law. Now, what happens is that the basis of standardization and what we witness to is usually a bunch of groups of lobbying from the industry, big corporations and corporate leaders. It has nothing to do with the global body of people. These people go into a room, they define what should be standardization on food, this, that. They write up it, they give it to governments. The governments agree, they follow it. This follows corporate interests. This is where you get the pharmaceutical companies, World Health Organization, and all of them who operate for the interests of big corporate interests and not for the interests of the people. So now, when we speak of the Ethiopian World Federation completing the four steps, population, government, all the four steps in Montevideo Convention, and in those standards, going to the last four standard of entering into relationships with other nations or with other states. So when we talk about signing the Treaty of the Circle of Life, and we're talking about with all of the indigenous peoples, the aim and goal of that is to also have all of the indigenous peoples come together and write out an agreements on natural food, natural health, the rights of shamans to be considered under, or natural healers to be considered under insurance policies and so forth. If our people have insurance, they should have the right to be able to use it for how they see fit for their health. That's what they pay it for, not for the industry to steer them to certain realities without them having any control in defining what is their reality. So then we hold nations, governments, corporations, and so forth to these standards, the standards that we, the Black peoples of the world, find fit for our people. And those that operate against these standards, they are operating against our standards of human rights. So anything that goes against these standards or tries to push us away from them, they're in violation. This is how you cross it to international law, because it is agreement under treaty amongst the indigenous peoples. So now it becomes binding amongst us as part of protecting human rights, not separating it in just a standard of how we regulate doing business and so forth, and how we regulate if food is cleansed or clean, but also on the basis of understanding it in the international law aspects. So I just wanted to put standardization out there. We'll talk more of it in detail, but it is a part of the key to us countering the forces that are implemented against us every day and implemented us continuously, and how they plan night and day how to implement these plans against us. So how do we counter them? How do we counter them? His Majesty has given us the tools, and we have an equal force. But we have not just the equal force, but a greater force. That's the hidden missing variable, the sleeping giant, a world federation, a world federation. Think of the power. United with Africa. I'm going to say, give thanks.
Yes, sir. Give thanks. Give thanks.
Yeah.
Front line for His Majesty we stand. Yes, sir. Right now, if we could have Sergeant of Arms close us out with a prayer.
Yes, sir. Hallelujah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Kadama, we are. Celestia. Yes, sir. We give thanks. In the Most High name, we affirm. Abacadus, Gedamari, Kadamari. Ali Celestia, Sim, Exhibit. We give thanks. Give grace in our lives, in our iris, for this wonderful reason in the night that we can have words sound to build amongst ourselves, to build among this ancient truth, amongst the current truth, which provides us freedom and the liberation we need to move forward with a purposeful life. We give thanks for the knowledge which has been shared on our hearts to give us the motivation, to give us the endurance, to give us the focus to be able to achieve this type of knowledge and to be able to strive for the things that the world tells us in so many ways that we can't have. We give thanks for the accomplishments and for the prerogatives of the emperor to come here and to bear the weight of every Black man and every Negro, every indigenous, every underprivileged, every second class, every downtrodden person on this earth, and to reestablish us and to reinstill in us our priesthood and our kingship. We give thanks to know that it's a great awakening taking place and that we have the keys. We are the master builders, the Hiram Abiffs of our lives. And we give thanks to understand and overstand that we are the keepers of our temple. And as we reestablish our priestly pillar in our lives and reestablish the Queen Mother in our lives, we understand the balance. We understand the love, life, light, liberation. For I am that I am. I am love. I am life. I am light. I am liberation. I am that I am. And I am that we are. And we give thanks today, a grateful cause, and a loud cry from our hearts to be able to know that our efforts here tonight will be multiplied and that our seeds shall be sown on fruitful land. For we know that we have elders which led us our way, and for the ones in our hearts that wasn't here on this call tonight, that we know are still helping us collectively build, and for the ones that are present, we know that these building blocks will help us continue to grow, continue to have a foundational effort, foundational strength provided by His Majesty, provided by the Most High, to give us the strength, the clarity, to give us the drive in our daily lives, in our personal lives, starting from self, leading the family, leading the community, leading the world. As we go through a healing process, as we go through a process of purity, and as we go through a process of reestablishing our goals, reestablishing ourselves and what we need to protect ourselves, to have our own collective security, to have our own means of protection, to have our own means of education, and to let our ancient culture be our truth and not the standardization of what the industrial and what the wasteful and the smiteful want to do in this world. So we give thanks for order, and we give thanks for Nagu Salam in our hearts. We ask that the words of our mouth and the meditation of our heart be acceptable in that sight, O Ixabir, our strength and our Redeemer. For we know, glorious your days, you sit up on the throne for Iva and Iva and Iva. So in the Most High name, Abacadus, Gidamari, Katamari, Haile Selassie, Sim Ixabir, we give thanks on this glorious light, on this glorious night, for each one, teach one, and we know this efforts to be true. And we ask again that our efforts are multiplied here on this night, and that we may continue to be able to have these type of reasonings and word sounds to build up our minds and to build up our iris, to go out there and keep attributing to the growth of the things that we need to protect ourselves from annihilation. So we give thanks. Yes, I, Aliyah, and the Most High, Abacadus, Gidamari, Katamari, Haile Selassie, Sim Exabir. We pray, we affirm, we meditate, and we give thanks. Sila, Sila, Sila. Ashe.
Yeah.
Sila.
Yes, I see. Yes, indeed. Another wonderful evening. We will check back in next strong on Thursday again. And also check us out on Sundays at State of Salam. Look out for those as well. And there's a few other things coming up. So, yes, I gratitude and thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Yes, sir. That's all.
We are. Yes, sir.
Greetings, everybody.
Greetings, greetings.
I hope everyone is good and I'm blessed. Just waking up here and glad to find you, but it's a blessing. So I would like just to share Psalms 121 and it says, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and the earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper, the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Selah. Stay blessed, brethren.
Yes, sir. Minister, I think you got to close out the Zoom in order to start the recording.